How much do you know about Ronnie James Dio? Let's check. So yeah, the other day a guy was selling one of these online, and this is not music that I didn't already have, but it was neat to have an actual physical CD of this type of release. And this is it's labeled Ronnie James Dio and the Prophets, but it's actually was at the time known as Ronnie Dio and the Prophets. It's called In the Beginning. The CD itself lists just 12 tracks, which is live at Dominoes in 1963. This is it's one of the only live albums that Ronnie Dio and the Prophets released. And it's really hard to find, of course, to try to get a copy of. Now, if you're not familiar, of course, you know, Ronnie James Dio went on to become one of the most lauded singers in metal history. But in the 60s and 70s, he was far from metal. So this is a live show of them. You know, you almost kind of feel like it's kind of like, hey, they're a bar band and they play doo-wop, they play songs, you know, of the time. Now, the thing that was neat about this when I got it, again, it only lists 12 songs. It only lists the songs for the Live at the Domino, and it says it's Live at the Domino. There's actually 28 songs on here because there's a second set, which starts off with an announcer talking about Happy New Year's, and at the end, Ronnie actually says that we hope you have enjoyed this, you know, New Year's. So it seems like it's a recording of a New Year's Eve party. Now, my assumption is it's probably New Year's 65, 66 or 66, 67. It wouldn't go beyond 67 because the band changed their name in 67 to the Electric Elves. So it most likely would have been before that. And the reason I say that it had to be after 65 is because they do some cover tunes that came out in 65. Some songs by the Beatles, the Kinks, the Stones. And the songs that they did were songs that came out in 1965. So it could have been later that year. It could have been a whole year later in 66. But it was kind of neat. It was a little rougher than the Live at Dominoes because it wasn't an official album. But real briefly, Ronald Padanova, New York, changed his name in 1960 to Ronnie Dio. Well, you know, started using the name Dio because in Italian, his native family heritage, it means God. And so Ronnie Dio became the name. But in the early 60s, in 61, the band was called Ronnie and the Red Caps. And they, you know, released a couple, there's some recordings out there of them. Just, again, some doo-wop type music.
People say that love isn't true. They will never carry it through. But when they find out the real thing, I'm gonna buy my little pony a wedding ring. Lover, lover. Oh, she's not in heaven, for how could she be when that angel is here with me? Well, I don't know how she got here, and what's no right kid.
And then in 63, they changed it to Ronnie Dio and the Prophets, which is what this represents. And that continued on into 67 when they changed their name to the Electric Elves. And under that name, they released a 7-inch single in 67 called Hey, Look Me Over.
Hey, look me over and walk away from me. Less than a third of what you want. I'll never be the girl to the best of my faulty recollections. Number 44 on my stack of rejection.
And then later on, they changed their name to just the Elves, dropping the Electric, and they became just the Elves. And under that name, there's a 69 single that was released called Walking in Different Circles.
We're walking in different circles, baby. It's a one-way street. You're off. I couldn't have been your puppet, baby. Chasing the wind 'cause love has gone.
And then in 1970, another one called Amber Velvet.
I can't go on pretending I needed a love, and there's no use defending myself. Amber velvet to call her, amber velvet to call her, a beautiful name for a beautiful girl.
And then in 72-ish, around that time, they released an album under the name of just Elf. And that's where most people probably pick up on the Dio story, because Elf went on to release 3 albums, and then in the early 70s there, they were discovered by Ritchie Blackmore, who essentially took the whole band Elf, put himself in there on guitar, removing the guitar player from Elf, I guess, and creating the band Rainbow. And then, of course, the rest is history. Dio was the first singer for when Rainbow started, and then he went from there on to Black Sabbath. So, and then the story, we know the rest of the story from there. But it's these early years that maybe are not as familiar, and I thought it'd be interesting to just share some of those tracks that we heard from those days. It's a totally different style. It's doo-wop. It's style of the 60s. It's the kind of style that was going on back then. Ronnie played bass, and there's actually one of the songs that I've got a copy of where he plays trumpet. So that was the style of the era, and it's a neat look back to think this is a childhood band, basically, that, who knew? Did he know that he would go on to become the great revered name in metal history that he became? I mean, it's just interesting to see the humble beginnings and some of the, the style change and the music change. If you watch how it morphed through the 60s, through the 70s and Elf, into Rainbow, and then how it just became, amazing, on more and more amazing from there. And then, of course, as we approach May, this will be the 11th anniversary since his passing. Hard to believe it's been that long, but anyway, yeah. So he made a big mark on this world, and it's neat to see some of these things be reissued. I don't know when this came out. It did just seem to come out. It doesn't have a date on it. Obviously, it's most likely unofficial. But anyway, it's nice to have. They don't seem to have a lot of the stuff from this time frame when you look on Discogs, at least. There is the Live at the Domino album and then some singles. But there's really and a compilation CD, but there's really not been a whole lot reissued. So it's kind of neat to have. Anyway, that's all. Just wanted to share that. Hopefully you took a interesting stroll down memory lane here for things that maybe not everybody knew about Ronnie James Dio's history. That's all for now, though. Thanks for watching. Rock on and rock hard.